The void did not scream, it held its breath. The world of void, once a pristine canvas of infinite white, had been stained. It was no longer a realm of neutrality, it was a cathedral of terror. In the dead center of this nothingness, gravity had been forced to bow. A planet hung there, suspended not by orbit but by the sheer, crushing weight of one man's will. It was planet Sadala, ripped from the chest of Universe 6 and dragged across dimensions to serve as a footstool for the new king. The sky above the planet was not blue, nor was it the comforting black of space. It was a suffocating, bruised violet, choked by clouds of crimson-gray ash that did not rain down but hovered, afraid to touch the ground. On the highest peak of Sadala, a throne sat. It was not made of gold, nor of rare minerals. It was forged from the calcified rib cages of cosmic beasts, ancient leviathans that had dwelled in the darkness before time began. And upon this throne of bone and silence sat the prince. Vegeta did not look like a god. He looked like the end of days. His skin was the color of pale marble, cracked in fissures, revealing a magma-like glow of primal red beneath. But it was his right arm that drew the eye and froze the heart. It was no longer Saiyan flesh. It was a jagged limb of obsidian scales, a dragon's claw consumed by the abyss, pulsing with a darkness that drank the light around it. He sat with his chin resting on his normal hand, his eyes pits of bleeding red and black, staring down at the base of his mountain. There, kneeling in the dirt, were the gods. Beerus, the destroyer of Universe 7, had his forehead pressed to the red soil. His ears were flattened, his body trembling with a vibration that rattled his jewelry. Beside him, Champa, Belmod, and the others remained prostrate. They did not dare to raise their heads. They did not dare to flare their Hakai energy. The hierarchy of the cosmos had been inverted. The destroyers were now the destroyed. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic, grinding sound of Vegeta's dragon claw tapping against the armrest of his bone throne, a piece built on absolute, suffocating terror. Far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, Son Goku looked up at a sky that felt too heavy, his heart hammering against his ribs, knowing that the silence was not a conclusion, it was a fuse. The balance of the multiverse hangs by a thread, and the shears are in the hand of a mad king. Before the heavens shatter and the seraphim rises, commit your spirit to this legend. Subscribe and bear witness, so this history is never forgotten. The air tasted of iron and ancient dust, a flavor that had no place in the sterile perfection of the null realm. But perfection was a memory now, a fragile concept that had been shattered and swept away by the winds of a new, terrible sovereignty. In the dead center of the infinite void, where the Grand Priest had once floated with ethereal grace, a planet now hung like a festering wound. Planet Sadala. It had been ripped from the chest of Universe 6, dragged across the membrane of dimensions by a force that defied physics, and anchored here as a monument to the impossible. The sky above its jagged peaks was not the comforting blue of home, nor the star-filled black of space. It was a suffocating, bruised violet, choked by clouds of crimson-gray ash that did not rain down, but hovered, swirling in lazy, predatory circles, afraid to touch the ground. On the highest peak of this stolen world, the silence was heavy enough to crush a star. A throne sat there, jagged and grotesque, forged not from gold or precious metals, but from the calcified rib cages of cosmic beasts, ancient leviathans that Vegeta had hunted in the spaces between seconds. And upon this throne of bone and silence sat the prince. Vegeta did not look like a god. Gods were beings of light and order, of detachment and balance. Vegeta looked like the end of days. His skin had turned the color of pale marble, a cold, hard white that looked more like stone than flesh. Fissures ran across his chest and face, glowing not with ki, but with a deep, pulsing magma-red light, as if his body could barely contain the primal fire burning within his core. But it was his right arm that drew the eye and froze the blood. It was no longer the limb of a Saiyan. It was a monstrosity of obsidian scales, a dragon's claw consumed by the abyss, lengthening and twisting into a jagged weapon of war. The fingertips ended in razor-sharp talons that dripped with a darkness so profound it seemed to drink the ambient light of the realm. He sat with a slouch that radiated absolute, terrifying confidence, his chin resting on his normal hand, his legs crossed. The orange fabric of Kakarot's gi, tattered and stained, was still tied around his left bicep, a splash of bright color in a monochrome nightmare. His eyes, voids of bleeding red and black, stared down at the base of his mountain. There, in the red dust of Sadala, the pantheon of the multiverse knelt. Beerus, the god of destruction of Universe 7, the entity who had once terrified Vegeta with a mere glance, now had his forehead pressed to the soil. His purple ears were flattened against his skull, his body trembling with a vibration that rattled the golden jewelry around his neck. Beside him, Champa, Belmod, Hades, and the others remained prostrate, their faces buried in the dirt. They did not dare to raise their heads. They did not dare to flare their Hakai energy. The hierarchy of the cosmos had not just been shifted, it had been inverted. The destroyers were now the destroyed, their divine authority stripped away by a mortal who had eaten a dragon god and murdered an angel. "You are too quiet," Vegeta's voice rumbled. It didn't sound like it came from his throat. It sounded like it came from the tectonic plates of the planet beneath them, a grinding, multi-layered resonance. "I remember a time when you were loud, Beerus. I remember a time when you came to my world and demanded pudding. You threatened to erase my family over a mesmerizingly small inconvenience." Beerus flinched. The sound of his name in that voice felt like a physical blow. "My lord," Beerus whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. We await your command." Vegeta laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound, devoid of humor. "My command? I have no commands for you. You are not soldiers. You are not warriors. You are bureaucrats with a license to kill." Vegeta lifted his right hand, the dragon arm. The obsidian scales clicked against each other, the sound echoing like cracking bones. He inspected the claw, turning it in the dim light. "I keep you here to remind myself. To remind myself that God is just a title given to those with the biggest stick. And right now, I am the only one holding the weapon. Far away, across the boundaries of dimensions, on a small blue marble called Earth, Son Goku stood on the lookout. The wind whipped at his gi, but he didn't feel it. He was looking up at the sky, his black eyes wide with a terror he hadn't felt since he was a child. He couldn't see the null realm, but he could feel it. He could feel the pressure of Vegeta's ki pressing down on the multiverse like a suffocating blanket. The fabric of reality was groaning, the beams of existence bending under the weight of an imbalance that shouldn't exist. "Vegeta," Goku whispered, his hands clenching into fists until the knuckles turned white. "You've gone too far. You're not guarding the universe anymore, you're holding it hostage." Back in the null realm, the silence was broken. High above the floating planet, suspended in the void, lay the Palace of All. It was a jellyfish-like structure, usually vibrant and glowing with the innocence of its masters. But today, it was dark. Inside the main chamber, two small figures stirred. The ZENOs, the Omni-Kings of the present and the future, sat up in their floating beds. They rubbed their eyes, yawning in perfect synchronization. They floated down to the checkerboard floor, looking around with childlike confusion. "Grand Priest," the present ZENO called out, his high-pitched voice echoing in the empty hall. "Candy," the future ZENO added, looking under a table. There was no answer. There was no bowing angel to offer them sweets. There was no soft guidance. There was only the cold draft of an open door. The two Zenos floated to the edge of their palace and looked down. They saw the red clouds. They saw the stolen planet. They saw the gods kneeling in the dirt, and they saw the monster sitting on the throne of bone. The present Zeno tilted his oval head. Messy. The future Zeno nodded. Very messy. Who made the playground ugly? The priest is gone. Present Zeno said, his voice losing its playful lilt. The rules are broken. If the rules are broken, future Zeno continued, raising a small, blue hand, then the game is over. They didn't scream. They didn't power up. They didn't ask for an explanation. To Zeno, a broken universe was like a broken toy. You didn't fix it. You threw it away. Erase, they said in unison. It wasn't a beam. It wasn't an explosion. It was a wall of absolute white, a wave of negation that rolled out from the palace of all, silent and inevitable. It didn't burn the air. It simply deleted the concept of space. It washed over the void, moving toward planet Sadala with the speed of a closing book. Galaxies in the distance simply vanished as the background of the multiverse was wiped clean. The erasure was coming for the throne. It was coming for the god killer. The horizon vanished. It didn't fade. It was simply redacted. The wall of absolute erasure descended from the zenith of the null realm, a blinding, horizon-spanning sheet of white that swallowed everything it touched. There was no sound to its approach, for sound required a medium to travel through, and the wave was deleting the medium itself. It was the ultimate censorship, the final edit of a story that had grown too unruly for its authors. On the surface of planet Sadala, the panic was instant and pathetic. Champa, the god of destruction of Universe 6, scrambled backward on his hands and knees, his tail bristling with a terror so primal it stripped him of his divinity. "It's the end," Champa screamed, his voice cracking. "The Omni-Kings have woken up. We're finished. We're all finished." Beerus did not scream. He simply stared at the oncoming wall of nothingness, his golden eyes wide and hollow. He had lived for millions of years. He had destroyed civilizations, star systems, and galaxies. He knew the scent of death better than any mortal. But this wasn't death. Death left a corpse. Death left a memory. This was unexistence. Vegeta. Beerus roared, looking up at the bone throne. "Do something. You dragged us here. You provoked them. Beg for mercy. Maybe if we sacrifice ourselves. Quiet." The word cut through the panic like a guillotine. Vegeta stood up. He didn't rush. He didn't power up. He simply unfolded his legs and rose from the throne of ribs. The crimson-gray ash swirling around the mountain peak seemed to freeze in deference to his movement. He walked to the edge of the precipice, his cape of shadow trailing behind him, and looked up at the descending apocalypse. "Beg," Vegeta repeated. The word tasting of bile. He looked down at Beerus with a sneer of profound disappointment. "That is why you failed, Destroyer. You treat them like masters. I treat them like obstacles." Vegeta stepped off the cliff. He didn't fly immediately. He let gravity take him for a heartbeat, falling toward the kneeling gods, before the air around him detonated. Boom! The sound was not of a sonic boom, but of reality fracturing. A shockwave of black and red lightning exploded outward, flattening the red forests of Sadala and forcing the gods of destruction to bury their faces in the dirt to avoid being blown away. Vegeta shot upward, a streak of charcoal fire ascending to meet the white heaven. The wall of erasure was seconds away. It filled the entire field of vision, a blinding purity that promised peace through oblivion. Vegeta flew straight into it. "Hez, committing suicide," Belmod whispered, peering through his fingers. "Hez trying to die before Zeno gets him." But Vegeta did not burn up. He did not dissolve. Just as the white wall threatened to swallow him, Vegeta raised his right arm, the dragon limb. The obsidian scales flared open, revealing veins of magma-hot energy pulsing beneath. The God-killer energy, that chaotic gray sludge that denied authority, surged into the claw. I decided, Vegeta roared, his voice shaking the foundations of the null realm, that I am done with your rules. He slashed. It was a motion that shouldn't have worked. You cannot slash a concept. You cannot cut a deletion command. But the God-killer form did not obey the laws of the Xenos. It was a paradox, a cancer in the code. RRRRRIP. A sound echoed across the multiverse, a sound like a billion sheets of canvas tearing at once. The white wall of erasure stopped. Then, right down the center, a hairline fracture appeared, of pitch black. The fracture widened. Vegeta, with his dragon claws buried in the fabric of the technique, pulled his arms apart. He was physically tearing the erasure wave in half. The white energy screamed a high-pitched, digital shriek as it was forced to part around the Saiyan prince. The wave split, passing harmlessly on either side of planet Sadala, carving two massive canyons of nothingness into the void below, but leaving the sanctuary untouched. Vegeta hovered in the gap he had created, breathing heavily, gray steam hissing from his marble skin. He looked up, past the torn curtain of destruction, directly at the floating palace of all. "Is that it?" Vegeta growled. He launched himself again. This time, he didn't stop. He broke the sound barrier, the light barrier, and the time barrier. He crashed through the front doors of the palace of all, shattering the divine architecture into glittering dust. Inside, the two Zenos floated back, their eyes widening. They had never seen a mortal inside their home. They had never seen a mortal who hadn't been erased. "Who?" Present Zeno asked, pointing a trembling finger. "Why?" Future Zeno whispered. Vegeta landed on the checkerboard floor. His boots cracked the pristine tiles. He stood tall, a nightmare of bone and shadow in a nursery of bright colors. He walked past the empty pillars where the Grand Priest used to stand. He walked right up to the throne of the Omni-Kings. The guards, the last two remaining attendants, tried to intervene. They materialized with their spears, their faces masks of duty. "Halt!" one shouted. Vegeta didn't even look at them. His dragon tail, thick and muscular, lashed out with the speed of a whip crack. It decapitated both guards in a single, fluid motion. Their heads rolled across the floor, their bodies dissolving into sparkles of light before they hit the ground. Vegeta didn't break stride. He stopped at the foot of the throne. He looked down at the two small beings who had held the leash of the multiverse for eons. They looked so small, so fragile. "You play games with lives," Vegeta said, his voice low, intimate, and terrifying. "You erase universes because they annoy you. You treat my race, my struggle, my pain, like a television show." Vegeta reached out. His massive, obsidian dragon hand closed around the collar of future Zeno's tunic. He lifted the Omni-King off the ground, bringing the small blue face level with his own bleeding eyes. "Bad Zeno," Vegeta hissed. "Game over." Future Zeno kicked his legs, confused. He raised a hand to erase Vegeta, but Vegeta's grip tightened. The God-killer energy seeped into Zeno's vest, dampening the erasure light. The Prince of Saiyans held the Lord of Everything like a naughty child. "I am the king now," Vegeta declared, his ego swelling to fill the room, blinding him to the shadows stretching long and dark behind the throne. "And in my kingdom, there are no resets." Vegeta was so focused on the deity in his hand, so drunk on the impossible victory, that he did not hear the sound of the void cracking behind him. He did not feel the temperature in the palace drop to absolute zero. He did not see the massive, vertical slit of a pupil opening in the darkness beneath Zeno's floating chair. The arrogance of the God-killer was absolute, and it was about to be his undoing. Victory is a potent wine, and Vegeta was drunk on it. He held the future Omni-King in his grasp, the fabric of the little deity's tunic bunching up in his obsidian fist. He felt the trembling of the entity that had erased timelines on a whim, and in that trembling, Vegeta found a twisted vindication. He had proven that a mortal could not only reach the gods but drag them down into the mud. He was so fixated on the god in his hand that he forgot the one floating behind him. Present ZENO hovered a few meters away, his small hands covering his mouth, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. He was watching his future self being manhandled, paralyzed by the sudden, violent overturning of his world's order. He was alone, unprotected, and crucially distracted. From the darkness beneath the floating throne, a sound emerged. It was not a roar. It was a wet, slithering noise, like a massive serpent uncoiling in a pool of oil. Vegeta's instincts, honed by decades of war, screamed at him. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. The god-killer energy in his arm pulsed a warning. He spun around, dropping future ZENO, his eyes searching the shadows. "Who is there?" Vegeta barked. The answer was a jaw. It didn't come from the shadows. It was the shadow, the floor of the palace of all, that pristine checkerboard surface, liquefied. From the black squares, a maw the size of a galaxy erupted. It was lined with rows of serrated, translucent teeth that dripped with the corruption of the dark sector. It was Zalama. The primal dragon god had not fled the universe. He had merely retreated to the blind spot of creation. He did not lunge at Vegeta. He knew the Saiyan was a walking paradox, a being currently too jagged for reality to digest. Instead, Zalama lunged at the source. Present ZENO didn't even have time to say, "Oh!" The dragon's jaws snapped shut around the present Omni-King. Crunch. The sound was sickeningly small. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of a grape being crushed, but it echoed with the psychic weight of a universe dying. The bright, innocent light of the Omni-King was instantly snuffed out, swallowed whole by the abyssal throat of the dragon god. Vegeta froze. His dragon arm twitched. Zalama didn't speak. He didn't even chew. He simply swallowed, his massive, scaled throat convulsing as the essence of pure reality slid down into a stomach made of pure void. Then, the screaming began. It wasn't ZENO screaming, it was the multiverse. The walls of the Palace of All began to bleed. The white void outside the windows turned a necrotic black. The air grew heavy, smelling of ozone and rotting flowers. Zalama's massive dragon form began to contort. Bones cracked and rearranged, scales melted and reformed. The dragon shrank, condensing, folding in on itself, crushing the infinite power of ZENO into a vessel of concentrated darkness. A pillar of black light erupted where the dragon had stood, piercing the roof of the palace. When the light faded, a new figure stood there. He was small, no taller than ZENO, but the innocence was gone. He wore armor forged from obsidian dragon scales that seemed to absorb the surrounding space. His head was oval, like ZENO's, but his skin was a bruised purple-black, and his eyes, they were not the blank eyes of a child. They were the vertical, burning slits of a predator, glowing with the cold intelligence of an ancient god. Omega ZENO, the Void King, future ZENO, still on the floor, scrambled backward, pointing at the entity. "Not friend, not friend." Omega ZENO turned his head. He didn't look at his future counterpart. He simply swiped his hand. Future ZENO dissolved. No erasure beam, no flash of light. He just ceased to be, reabsorbed into the dominant timeline of the monster standing before them. Then, Omega ZENO looked at Vegeta. "The monkey sits on the throne." Omega ZENO said. His voice was not high-pitched. It was a chorus of 1,000,000,000 dead souls speaking in unison, a resonant, metallic drone that vibrated in Vegeta's marrow. The monkey thinks he is the evolution, Vegeta growled, stepping back, raising his dragon arm. The god-killer energy flared, turning the air gray. I defeated you once, lizard. I'll peel you out of that shell and rule number 1, Omega Zeno interrupted. He didn't shout, he simply stated a fact. Saiyans have no power. It wasn't a spell. It was a rewrite of the source code. Instantly, the gray aura around Vegeta vanished. It didn't fade. It was deleted. The magma-red light in his cracks extinguished, leaving his skin looking like dead, cold ash. But the horror was his arm, the majestic, obsidian dragon claw that had torn through erasure began to crumble. The scales turned to dust, the muscle withered. Gah! Vegeta gripped his arm, falling to one knee. His arm was reverting, shrinking back to a mortal limb, but it was ruined, blackened, shriveled, and useless, hanging limp at his side. He tried to summon his ki. He tried to reach for the anger, the pride, the primal hunger, but there was nothing. The well was dry. Rule number 2. Omega Zeno continued, taking a slow step forward. The floorboard screamed under his small feet. The rebel must kneel. Slam. Vegeta hit the floor. He didn't trip. The gravity of 12 universes had been localized onto his shoulder blades. His nose smashed into the tiles, breaking instantly. The floor cracked into a crater beneath him. His armor shattered, the pieces digging into his flesh. Get out! Vegeta wheezed, spit and blood bubbling from his lips. He pushed against the floor with his good hand, his triceps screaming, his veins bulging. He was the prince of all Saiyans. He did not kneel. He would not kneel. Omega Zeno tilted his head, watching the struggle with cold curiosity. Resilience. A glitch in your biological design. Inefficient. The Void King raised a hand. Above his palm, a spear materialized. It was not made of energy. It was made of true death, a substance so black it looked like a hole in the page of reality. It crackled with purple lightning that whispered the names of everyone who had ever been forgotten. Rule number 3, Omega Zeno whispered, pointing the spear at the back of Vegeta's head. You are not. Vegeta stared at the cracks in the tile, inches from his eyes. His vision was blurring. The crushing weight was suffocating his lungs. He couldn't move. He couldn't fight. The silence returned, but this time he wasn't the one holding the weapon. He had flown too close to the sun, and the sun had eaten him. Kakarot, Vegeta whispered, the name escaping his lips like a prayer he didn't believe in. The spear dropped. The distance between life and death is often measured in heartbeats, but in the Palace of All, it was measured in something far smaller, the width of a shadow. The spear of true death fell. It was not a physical weapon that cut through the air. It was a deletion cursor dropping through a line of code. It made no sound, for it was the end of sound. It descended toward the back of Vegeta's neck, the purple lightning coiling around the tip, hungering for the prince's history, ready to scrub his name from the memories of his children, his wife, and his rivals. Vegeta, pinned by the gravity of 12 universes, could only watch the reflection of his own erasure in the polished floor tiles. His breath hitched. He did not close his eyes. He would not die in the dark. Pop, the air displaced. It wasn't a sonic boom. It was the desperate, frantic tear of instant transmission pushed beyond its theoretical limit. Goku materialized at the edge of the crater. He didn't arrive in a combat stance. He arrived stumbling, his chest heaving, his senses assaulted by the sheer, crushing wrongness of Omega Zeno's presence. He saw the broken floor. He saw the God-Killer, the man who had torn apart the Grand Priest, reduced to a trembling heap of broken bones and terrified silence. And he saw the spear. Vegeta, Goku screamed. The sound tore from his throat, raw and panicked. He launched himself forward. He flared his aura, summoning the silver light of Ultra Instinct. The divine technique that acted on its own, the pinnacle of martial arts that Whis had spent years drilling into his skull. Clear your mind, sever the emotion, let the body move. But the body didn't move. As Goku crossed the threshold of the throne room, the silver light around him flickered and died. Omega Zeno didn't even look at him. The Void King simply existed, and his existence dictated the laws of physics. Rule number 1, Saiyans have no power. The mandate crushed Goku's lungs, his flight failed. He crashed onto the checkerboard tiles, sliding across the floor, his skin scraping against the stone. He looked up, helpless. The spear was inches from Vegeta. Kakarot. Vegeta's voice was a wet gurgle, barely audible over the hum of the void. He didn't look at Goku, he looked at the floor. Don't! Come closer! Run! Goku froze. He had heard Vegeta angry. He had heard Vegeta arrogant. He had even heard Vegeta afraid. But he had never heard Vegeta resigned. The prince had accepted the end. Run, Vegeta whispered, his eyes dimming. Survive. Remember. Pie us. Something inside Goku snapped. It wasn't a bone. It wasn't a seal. It was the lesson. For years, he had been trained to be like them. To be like Whis. To be like Maris. To be calm. To be neutral. To detach his power from his heart so that he could wield the tools of the angels. Emotion is a hindrance, they said. Rage clouds the judgment, they said. To be a god, you must stop being a man. Goku looked at the falling spear. He looked at his best friend, his brother, the only being in the multiverse who understood the loneliness of their strength, waiting to be wiped out like a smudge on a piece of paper. Calm? Goku thought, the word tasting like poison. You want me to be calm? If being a god meant watching his family die without shedding a tear, then he didn't want it. If perfection meant standing by while Vegeta was erased, then to hell with perfection. No. Goku pushed himself off the floor. The silver light of Ultra Instinct tried to manifest, tried to calm him, but Goku rejected it. He grabbed the angel power boiling inside him, the sacred, neutral energy he had cultivated, and he didn't suppress it. He ignited it. He poured the gasoline of pure, unadulterated Saiyan rage into the fire of angelic holiness. It was a contradiction. It was a heresy. It was oil and water, fire and ice. The two energies clashed inside his heart, threatening to tear him apart at the atomic level. His heart hammered like a war drum. His veins burned as if filled with molten gold. Omega Zeno's eyes narrowed. The spear of true death accelerated. Die, the Void King commanded. The spear touched Vegeta's skin. The black light began to eat the armor. Boom! The palace of all vanished in a flash of blinding light. It wasn't white. It wasn't the cold blue of the angels. It was gold. Heavy, metallic, solid gold. The shockwave blasted Omega Zeno backward, his obsidian boots carving deep trenches into the floor. The gravity of the 12 universes was shattered, blown away by a pressure that felt less like energy and more like a physical wall of conviction. Omega Zeno shielded his eyes, the vertical slits dilating in surprise. What? The light faded slowly, revealing the center of the room. The spear of true death was gone, shattered into a million dissolving sparkles. Vegeta was still on the floor, alive, his eyes wide, staring up. Hovering above him, shielding him from the judgment of the void, was a wing. It was massive, spanning 20 feet, composed not of feathers but of hard, geometric shards of golden light. It hummed with a sound like a choir of bells. The wing retracted, folding back to reveal the warrior standing beneath it. Goku stood there, but the orange gi was gone, replaced by a raiment of woven light. His hair was no longer black or silver. It was spiked and rigid, turning into a metallic gold that didn't flow, but stood fixed like a crown. His eyes had lost their pupils. They were pools of solid, molten gold, devoid of mercy, devoid of confusion. Behind him, 6 wings of blazing seraphic light unfurled, filling the throne room with a heat that scorched the air. Kakarot. Vegeta wheezed, the air returning to his lungs. Goku didn't look down. He stared straight at Omega Zeno. His voice, when he spoke, was not his own. It was a legion. It echoed from everywhere at once, layered with the weight of 1,000 judgments. "I am not a god," Goku said, stepping forward. The floor tiles turned to gold where his feet touched them. "And I am not an angel. I am the answer to your silence." Omega Zeno straightened up, his face regaining its cold composure. "Anomaly detected. Rule number 3. You cease to X." "I refuse," Goku interrupted. He didn't scream it. He pronounced it. And the universe listened. The universe did not shake. To shake implies that there is a foundation to rattle, a structure that remains intact while it vibrates. But in the confrontation between the Void King and the Seraphim, there was no foundation. There was only the collision of 2 absolute truths. Omega Zeno raised both hands. The darkness pooling in his palms was not merely energy, it was the ink of the cosmos. With a flick of his wrists, he hurled it forward, a tsunami of absolute negation. It was a wave designed to rewrite the history of the room, to make it so that the gold light of the Saiyan had never been kindled. Rule number 4. Omega Zeno intoned, his voice grinding against the golden light. "The anomaly is deleted." The wave crashed into Goku, or rather, it tried to. As the darkness touched the perimeter of Goku's aura, it hissed. It sounded like water hitting a hot skillet. The black ink of the void didn't swallow the gold. It was calcified by it. The wave froze in mid-air, turning into a wall of gray ash, and then crumbled, raining down as harmless dust. Goku walked through the falling debris. His 6 wings of hard light did not flap. They remained fixed and majestic behind him, radiating a heat that was rewriting the temperature of the null realm. "You speak of rules," Goku said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly so. It lacked the playfulness of his past, replaced by the heavy resonance of a guardian who has seen the precipice. "But you forgot the first rule of this multiverse." Omega Zeno stepped back. For the first time since his birth, the fusion felt a sensation that was alien to his code: hesitation. He summoned a cage of dimensional bars, attempting to trap the Saiyan in a time loop. Goku didn't dodge. He walked into the bars. His golden shoulder touched the time barrier, and the barrier shattered like glass. "We don't know when to quit," Goku finished. He vanished. It was not instant transmission. There was no sensing of ki, no lock-on. Goku simply occupied the space in front of the Void King because he willed it so. He was there, towering over the small, armored deity. Omega Zeno panicked. The vertical pupils of his predator eyes dilated. He lashed out with a clawed hand, aiming for Goku's throat. "I am the author. You cannot edit me." Goku caught the wrist. He didn't squeeze. He didn't break the bone. He simply held it. And where his golden fingers touched the obsidian armor of the Void King, the darkness began to peel away. The corruption of Zalama screeched a high-pitched, animalistic sound of pain. "You're not the author," Goku said, his solid gold eyes boring into the soul of the monster. "You're just the eraser." Goku pulled his free arm back. The 6 wings behind him shifted, rotating forward, their tips converging around his right fist. The light intensified, becoming so bright that the shadows in the corners of the palace were bleached out of existence. It wasn't a spirit bomb. It wasn't a Kamehameha. It was the concentrated essence of a life spent breaking limits, fused with the stolen authority of the angels. "Seraphim strike," Goku whispered. Omega Zeno opened his mouth to scream, to utter a final rule, but the sound never came. "Soul purge," Goku punched. The fist connected with the center of Omega Zeno's chest. There was no explosion, There was no shockwave that destroyed the galaxy. The energy was too focused, too pure for collateral damage. The impact was silent. A beam of translucent, liquid gold shot through Omega Zeno's back, piercing the infinite void behind him. For a second, time stood still. Then the scream came. But it didn't come from Zeno. A shadow was ripped from the body of the Omni-King. Like a demon being exorcised by the sun, the spirit of Zalama was ejected. The massive, serpentine silhouette of the dragon god was torn from the flesh of the child, thrashing and howling as the golden light burned its very concept. Zalama clawed at the air, trying to anchor himself, trying to scurry back into the safety of the dark sector. "No," Zalama roared, his voice disintegrating along with his form. "I am eternal. I am the first." "You are done," Goku stated. The golden light flared one last time, a pulse of absolute purification. Zalama's shadow shattered. It dissolved into motes of black dust, which were then consumed by the light until nothing remained, not a scale, not a whisper, not a memory. The armor on the small figure crumbled away. Omega Zeno fell backward, his eyes rolling up in his head. As he hit the floor, the purple skin faded, returning to the bright blue and purple of the innocent. Present Zeno lay there, unconscious, thumb in his mouth, sleeping as if he had just had a bad dream. The silence returned to the palace of all. But this time it was not the silence of terror. It was the silence of a storm that had finally broken. The golden light around Goku began to flake away. The 6 majestic wings dissolved into particles of soft energy. His hair dimmed, turning from metallic gold back to deep black. His eyes found their pupils again. Goku fell to his knees, his chest heaving, the divine adrenaline crashing out of his system. "Heh," Goku chuckled, a weak, breathless sound. That was rough. A few meters away, amidst the rubble of the floor, a hand moved. Vegeta dragged himself into a sitting position. His dragon arm was gone, reverted to a normal Saiyan limb, though it was bruised and trembling. He looked at the sleeping Zeno. He looked at the spot where Zalama had been erased. And then he looked at Goku. The rivalry was there. The annoyance was there. But underneath it, buried deep in the marrow of his pride, was something else. A begrudging, furious respect. "You show off," Vegeta rasped, clutching his ribs. "You just had to get wings, didn't you?" A halo wasn't enough. Goku rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling where the stars were beginning to reappear. "I didn't choose the wings, Vegeta. They just happened. I just wanted to stop the spear." Vegeta spat blood onto the broken tiles. "Next time, I'll be the one doing the saving. Don't think this makes you the winner." I know," Goku laughed, closing his eyes. "We'll settle it later. For now, let's just sleep." Above them, the sky of the Null Realm shifted. The bruised violet clouds of Vegeta's rain dispersed. The white void softened, turning into a deep, endless blue. Stars ignited one by one, birthed from the residual energy of the fallen gods. A column of light descended. Whis, the Grand Priest's staff now in his hand, landed softly on the checkerboard floor. Behind him were Vados and the other angels. They did not look at the sleeping Zeno. They looked at the 2 battered, broken mortals lying in the ruins of the divine palace. Whis walked over to them. He didn't scold. He didn't offer a lesson. He simply tapped his staff on the ground, healing their wounds just enough to keep them alive. "The hierarchy is broken," Vados whispered, looking at her brother. "Father is gone. The dragon is gone. Who rules now?" Whis looked down at the Saiyans. He saw the potential that had terrified the gods. He saw the bond that had rewritten the laws of erasure. "No one rules," Whis said, a small smile playing on his lips. "The era of absolute rulers is over. The universe has found its guardians." He looked up at the new stars burning in the sky. Not emotionless gods, Whis murmured, but warriors who know pain, warriors who know rage, and warriors who know love. The era of deities had closed. The era of Saiyans was eternal.